see if this works. We have about a 40-minute presentation tonight. The last time we were in East Hartford, I guess, was in December of 2015, so about not quite a year and a half ago. We've made some good progress since then. So tonight's agenda, obviously we have a lot of displays here pertaining to the 8491 Interchange Study, and then in the other room, if you haven't been there, we have a lot
Hi.
of...
My name is J.C. McCauley.
I'm McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Digital 3D model. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, we can give you a tour on that. There's a running loop, but we can also bring you to any location in the project area. It's really valuable. It's a new, enhanced model. There is one on the website right now, but soon this one will be up and running, and it's a really good preview of where we think the project is heading. So tonight's agenda, we'll do a brief update on the i84 Hartford project itself. We'll also, Gina Tremarco from Gina will make a presentation on the multimodal station planning effort, and again, it's in the other room. There will be a workshop at around 6:15 when we're done here. And then finally, the i84 I-91 interchange study in this room will be a workshop at the same time at 6:15. So a little update on the i84 Hartford project. If you're not familiar, this is the section from around Park Street to just shy of the interchange, the I-91 interchange. It's a 2-mile section. We started 3 or 4 years ago looking at a variety of alternatives. We've narrowed down our alternatives to one proposed build alternative, and that is the so-called lowered highway alternative. Also, the no build alternative always has to be considered. So we started with 4. You'll see them at the top in this graphic. We've gone through the so-called level 1 screening. That's just evaluating the full range of alternatives. We've gone through that. Federal Highway concurs with our assessment that the lowered highway, the elevated highway and the tunneled highway alternative should be taken off the table. So now we're working on the so-called level 2 screening, and this analysis will refine the number of variations of the lowered highway down to a handful. So we're working on that as we speak. And that will lead to a preferred alternative. I did this the other night where I didn't advance the slide. To a preferred alternative identified in the draft EIS in 2018. We have also updated our cost estimate range. In 2015, we did a cost estimate review. I won't spend a lot of detail, but the lowered highway alternative is the least expensive build alternative with a cost range of $4.3 to $5.3 billion. We just updated it early this year. Good news is that we're still in that range, that $4.5 to $5.5 billion. We're looking at our risks, keeping our eye on what could change the schedule, what could change the project cost. Ongoing work, we continue to refine the lowered highway alternative. Specifically, we're working on some east end, this is near Asylum Hill, existing Union Station, ramp and street configurations. We're looking at a number of different options. We're also starting to get into the stage construction scenarios. This is starting to evaluate how we're going to build the project. And that's going to take some time to go through some different staging scenarios to see how we're going to maintain traffic, how long it will take to build the project. I mentioned the multimodal station planning. That's going to be pretty intense this calendar year. It's ongoing. The environmental document process, that is the environmental impact statement that is underway as we speak. So a little bit more about that. The consultant, Christine Tiernan, will speak to that very briefly. Actually, I guess I'm going to speak to it right here. You're going to talk about the environmental issues on the interchange study. They are working on the technical analysis. We expect the draft environmental impact statement in the summer of 2018. There will be a public hearing towards the end of 2018 and a final EIS in the summer of 2019 and a record of decision. That is when we officially make a decision on the scope of the project, what the budget will be, what the impacts will be, and all the pros and all the benefits. So we talk about certain alternatives tonight, but a formal decision is not made until 2019. So be mindful of that. And I'm going to turn it over to Gina.
Thank you, Rich. So just addressing a little bit about the multimodal station planning area. Right now we have the existing tracks, Amtrak tracks that serve Union Station in downtown Hartford. But as part of the I84 project, they will be moving west. And they'll be moving west about 1,000 feet, so about a block and a half from where they are currently. And because of that, there's going to be a need to have a new rail station by the tracks and no longer at Union Station. But then the question becomes, what else do you put near the rail station? So right now the station area is about a 20-acre area, and so Union Station is right there on the east side of the study area. The tracks will be relocated here, about a 4-minute walk, so not real long. And it's about a 20-acre site we're looking at, and what could happen on that site? What type of development? What type of a station? Should it be both rail and bus? Should it be bus remaining at Union Station and rail to the west? So all different ideas that we're looking at and what I'd like your help with as we move to the workshop after this presentation. So the station planning effort started a few months ago in January. It's a 12-month effort for the first part. The first part is really just identifying the station footprint, not looking at the design of the building, that'll come later, but trying to figure out what should go into the station area, what should the footprint look like, and where should it be located. We're considering all different modes in that whole station area, that 20-acre site. So you have the rail, and you not only have Amtrak, but starting in 2018, you're going to have Connecticut Rail, which is going to be a regional rail system coming into town. Also high-speed rail way in the future, but different types of rail will be serving the station, as well as the buses. You have Peter Pan and Greyhound buses, and you have Connecticut Transit local buses serving the station, as well as your taxis, other vehicles for drop-off and pickup, and then of course worrying about the pedestrian and the bikes. It's really important that the station area and around the station area is walkable. And how do you integrate that into the station planning effort? So we're going through a 6-step process. We're establishing goals and objectives, we're researching design requirements, we're gathering information including from the public tonight, we're identifying strategies, constraints, and opportunities, determining requirements, and summarizing what we're calling the program. What is the square footage needs for the future station? And we're considering the different modes, the different types of vehicles coming out of the station, the size of the buses, what the platform size is, what are the customer requirements, what type of amenities do people want to see in the station, what are the back of house needs, offices, mechanical, electrical rooms, what type of codes are driving the programming decisions, the zoning code, and so on, and how about access? How best do you get your vehicles in and out of that station area? So we know some things. We know the projected ridership, and that determines the square footage of the building and the waiting areas. We know the platform sizes, and we know that there's going to be parking that's displaced. So how best do you incorporate parking, and how much parking do you put in that station area, in that 20-acre site, and how does that parking look? In the zoning code, the city has a new form-based code that allows for mixed-use development. So stations tend to generate what's called transit-oriented development, or TOD development. So residential, retail, commercial, hotel development, and what should that area look like? Our plans aren't going to show that. The city is starting a master planning effort, but our project should allow for that type of development in the future. So how do you design it so it allows for it? Union Station, beautiful building, currently used for all the transit uses. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. How does that get integrated into the whole planning area in the future, and how do you retain that use and the beautiful building? In terms of transit-oriented development, what are the best ways to encourage development? As I said, how do you place that footprint on the site to encourage this type of development in the future? So we'd like to invite you to participate in the workshop. We have concepts, and right now those are strictly concepts. Nothing's definite. That we just threw down 4 different ideas, A, B, C, and D. There could be 100 ideas. That's what we need your input on. We have a survey for you to take, and then we have a board asking what your design goals and priorities are. So our next steps over this year would be to complete the programming data gathering, prepare these conceptual site alternatives and refine them, and then pick one, hopefully by September. Then we talk a little bit more about transit operations, how the vehicles will be coming in and out of the site. And then we're developing what are called 15% architectural drawings, which is basically site layout, site plans. And that should occur by the end of the year. And we're doing this in partnership. As I said, the city has hired a master planning consultant. We will be working with them, bouncing ideas back and forth. We're obviously working with the Connecticut DOT project team, as well as stakeholders like yourself. And with that, I am turning it over to Rich. Back to Rich.
So this is the I84 I91 interchange is a study that we've begun several months ago, and last week in Hartford we had a public session, and of course tonight we're here. So this is the first time we've been out in the community to talk a little bit more detail, but we don't have any answers tonight. We simply have concepts to talk to you about. So a little brief background. The original interchange was constructed in the 1960s and modified in the 1980s. It's heavily traveled. It serves 275,000 vehicles per day, and you can tell, by the photograph that it's really in a constrained environment. You have the Connecticut River, you have flood dikes, you have a railroad corridor going through there, buildings, and as big as that footprint looks, it's very, very tight and frankly an obsolete design configuration. So why are we undertaking this study? So we've talked about the viaduct project area. It's about 2 miles. And our project area with the viaduct will end right around where the existing tunnel is today on I84, near the vicinity of the new ballpark. So we don't intend to, nor can we, modify the interchange and the Bulkley Bridge. The interchange and the Bulkley Bridge are a true bottleneck, right? It's where the number of through lanes are reduced from 3 through lanes in our project area. So our project area, the I84 viaduct project area, is roughly 2 miles here, just shy of the interchange. Just to the west of our project area is where the number of through lanes is reduced. Also, interestingly, I91 has limited capacity by through lanes. So it's the source of a lot of congestion, this particular area. So we decided that the viaduct project needs to focus on the 2-mile section of where the viaduct is. We need to deal with the infrastructure problems. We need to modernize that section, but recognizing that we are not going to be able to fix all of the capacity problems, all of the congestion. We're going to make some really good improvements. We're going to improve safety and operations. But at the end of the day with the viaduct, there will still be a certain amount of congestion caused by the area of the interchange and to the east over the Bulkley Bridge. So the study is to explore 3 very broad different scenarios. One scenario would be the existing alignment. What will it take? What is the viability and the feasibility of improving capacity at the existing interchange and over the Bulkley Bridge into East Hartford? We'll also look at a more bold scenario, if you will, of realigning a portion of I-84 up to the north in some fashion, back down across the Connecticut River into East Hartford. That, by building that, we could increase capacity on a new alignment. The third scenario is a southerly alignment, which would begin somewhere near Flatbush Avenue, head east over to the vicinity of the Charter Oak Bridge, again over into East Hartford. So these 3 pretty distinct alternatives we are exploring. We don't have any answers tonight, but that's the fundamental scope of the study. So some of those concepts are very bold, very exciting, obviously, and could be very dramatic. So in thinking about these very dramatic proposals for I-84 and I-91, we're asking what could be the vision for the area, what are the opportunities by making these kind of big alignment changes. So the vision could be improved quality of life, improved access to the river, certain amount of recaptured land could be achieved by freeing up and changing the alignment of the freeways. That could lead to development opportunities. Certainly new public spaces could be created, and economic opportunities and job creation. And then we're asking ourselves, as part of the study, what are those transportation alternatives that could serve that vision? We'll look to improve not only the freeway and the highway system on the interstate, but also locally, the highway and bus and rail modes as part of any alternative, and non-motorized options, bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. So we're underway. We've been at it for several months. We think we're going to wrap things up later next year. We're starting with those 3 preliminary alternatives. There might be some variations of each one of those. We'd like to narrow down, take off the table what appear to be less feasible or more impactful options down to 1 or 2, and focus our attention on those for the remaining of the study. So here's our schedule. This is where we are today. So we've done a lot of data gathering. We're nearly done with the needs and deficiencies of existing conditions. We're starting to look at those alternatives, but really it's later in 2017 and early 2018 where we'll come out and share some of those concepts in greater detail with you. So I'm going to have Christine Tiernan come and speak to some of the environmental concerns.
Thank you, Rich. So we have begun our environmental and socioeconomic screening to identify what the key environmental and socioeconomic constraints in the study area are going to be. This map shows in the red bubble the overall study area that we did our screening in, which pretty much parallels what Rich identified as the northern and the southern alignments. And the biggest takeaway when you compare this study area to the viaduct study area is that this is more driven by natural resources with the Connecticut and the Hockanum rivers and all the floodplains and wetlands associated with those resources. So as you can see here in the study area, we have about 570 acres of state wetland, about 875 acres of federally designated wetlands. And you can see they're flanking both the Hockanum and the Connecticut River. And what that means is that we need to develop design that minimizes, that avoids, and that mitigates those natural resource impacts. It means that it's going to be a heavier lift than the viaduct project in terms of securing the environmental permits from the Corps of Engineers, from the EPA, from DEEP that we need to implement this project. Similarly with, just go back 1 second. So when you overlay, you can see the conceptual line work for the alignments that Rich just talked about and the potential configurations of the interchanges, and you can see they lie within those wetland resource areas. When you look at floodplains, we have all the green and the blue and the various hues of green there, identifying the 500-year flood and the 100-year floodplains, again, associated and flanked along the Connecticut and the Hockanum rivers. And what that means is that we're going to have to minimize our pavement when we design this and have stormwater management in mind with design and planning for detention basins, retention basins, so we can secure all the permits that we need. And again, you can see when you overlay the potential line work, we are within those floodplain areas. Moving from the natural resources to socioeconomic, we have a robust environmental justice population within the study area. EJ communities are either communities that are identified based on minority populations or versus low income. We have 81% of this study area is defined by minority populations, about 48% low income. So what this means when we develop this project is that we need to make sure there are no disproportionate environmental or socioeconomic impacts to those EJ communities. And again, when you overlay the conceptual roadway alignments, you can see in the pink areas and the yellow areas, those are EJ communities that really need to be addressed. The criteria that we're going to be looking at when we identify the impacts of the alternatives and which alternatives are favored over others: environmental impacts, socioeconomic impacts, the feasibility, does it meet purpose and need from a traffic perspective, mobility, does it address our mobility goals, and of course the ultimate cost. And down the line, this is clear based on the environmental resources, based on the socioeconomic resources that we are seeing, that this is clearly going to be an environmental impact statement, based on the National Environmental Protection Act, based on the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act, it would be an EIE. It's going to be its own environmental impact statement. It's got its own independent utility. It's got its own separate purpose and need. It's separate from the viaduct project, and that's going to unravel over the coming years in terms of developing that that document and going through the process associated with that. So with that, I think Mike is going to talk more about the interchange project itself.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening, everybody. My name's Mike. I'm with the project team, and I'm going to give you some kind of a different perspective of this interchange project. Some big picture, kind of aspirational visions that the study team has. We know that this is a project that's more than just an interchange. Clearly, that's the genesis behind it. But what this really is all about is taking a look at East Hartford and Hartford and the relationships to one another and the relationships to the river, promoting, economic growth over time. So when we think of this project, we want to think of this as a real regional project. It has much larger ramifications. So this is roughly the agenda I'm going to go through. It won't take too long, but I think you'll enjoy some of this. We're going to look at some of the obvious transportation issues that we need to address, including some of the congestion. I think as Rich noted, the I84 viaduct project doesn't really address the choke points that the current interchange with 91 presents. So we want to look at it from that perspective, but also how it relates to the city streets and the grid system. Other long-term goals, such as economic development within both East Hartford and Hartford. Again, re-engaging the cities with the waterfront. And how does this also deal with sort of the public transit system that's currently under development in the city? So we'll go through that pretty briefly. So this is really, we kind of look at this vision as trying to address what we call a constrained and fragmented core. This area of Hartford and East Hartford is really the central urban core of the greater Hartford area. And if you look at, the downtown in orange here, it's really flanked by a lot of big highway infrastructure. You have obviously I84 to the north, kind of the northern boundary of downtown, and 91 kind of separating downtown from the waterfront. But you also have this satellite of other districts around the area, including neighborhoods, downtown north where the ball field has just been developed, the Asylum Hill and Frog Hollow neighborhoods, Charter Oak, as well as the east side over here in East Hartford with sort of the area along Connecticut Boulevard with some of the auto-oriented uses, and then sort of the office park region south of I-84. And then all of this massive infrastructure that's really consuming a lot of land in East Hartford. So what are some of the challenges to this? Well, we know from the I-84 project that clearly this old infrastructure is consuming a lot of land and really dividing the city of Hartford in half. It's really bisecting the neighborhoods. You can see from this image here, a satellite image looking down kind of at Bushnell Park in the Capitol, there's a lot of really massive infrastructure that's really prohibiting connectivity and growth. We also know that it really limits, it's been an economic barrier for many years. Here's the downtown area and then downtown north. It's a real kind of a massive barrier. And you can just tell, some of the disinvestment that's happened over on the downtown north side, which is finally starting to get catalyzed a little bit by some of the new development. But clearly that's been a major barrier with regard to that. And the interchange itself, we kind of call this the congestion generator. It's really the Bulkley Bridge, a couple lanes in each direction. It's really a choke point, and as peak hour traffic funnels across that bridge, it really causes network backups, along 91 north and south, as well as 84 east and west. So that's an issue that the I84 viaduct project currently cannot address. And then kind of the other piece that Rich didn't show on his previous graphic is, what does this do to 91? This offers some real opportunities for addressing 91 as well, which is a real barrier between the city of Hartford and the waterfront, as well as an eyesore to East Hartford as well. So there's a series of flood barrier walls that currently exist against the water along the river, and those are very old also and in need of constant maintenance and repair. So we have to think about that as a potential need going into the future, as well as a railroad that passes, sort of weaves beneath I-91. So it's a real corridor with lots of uses. And finally, the bridges. These are old bridges, the Bulkley and Founders Bridge. What will a project like this potentially do to those structures? How could those potentially be reused? Back in the 1970s, something kind of like this was looked at, and I know a number of you I spoke to in the room tonight has remembered this project. This was kind of a broader, more ambitious bypass that was supposed to take traffic around Hartford, kind of starting at 84 and Route 9 here in West Hartford by the mall, going up through the reservoir, across through Bloomfield where it picked up with 291 and then connected back to I84. So again, this was a very large bypass. It would have had massive environmental disruptions. It was challenged legally, and ultimately it was shot down and never constructed. But we've been asked about it a lot over the last few years. Did this have any merit? What would it do if it was built today? And so we took a look at it, and the reality is it does not do a lot to address this piece of highway that we have going through Hartford, because it only takes about 5 to 10% of traffic from I-84 going through Hartford and East Hartford and diverts it. So it doesn't have a whole lot of benefit for us here in the greater Hartford region. So a couple of the highway scenarios currently being considered. Rich showed you those broad arrows. We're going to show you just a couple here and how they might look after constructed. Some aspirational, visionary photographs. There's obviously other ideas that are around. I know many of you probably heard of Congressman Larson's proposal. Some of that is reflected in here, but clearly we're going to have to look at a wide range of alternatives as we move forward. So here's the existing condition. Here's our current I-84 project. This is a project that has to get completed because of the aging infrastructure. But we also have this idea of kind of a tunnel that starts somewhere around Flatbush Interchange on I-84, takes you below ground in a pretty deep tunnel, along with a very deep interchange connecting to the Charter Oak Bridge and getting traffic back onto 84 east of the river. So this is a big idea. It would be, as we envision it now, a bored tunnel, very deep. Would have lots of challenges associated with that. But it would also allow us to now address 91, potentially some other tunnel or capped highway to, again, re-engage the city with the waterfront. So another idea is the northern alternative, and that's, as Rich mentioned, bringing I-84 kind of off alignment right about here where there's a railroad line, bringing it up the railroad line, kind of, North Meadows and across a new bridge over the Connecticut River here, and then back down to I-84. So this wouldn't be a tunnel, but this would be a highway that would divert just around Hartford. And what that would allow us to do is really rethink how existing I-84 across the Bulkley Bridge would be reused. We could create a much more city scaled kind of roadway in the place of I-84 today. Something that's a little bit more multimodal, where bikes and pedestrians would feel more comfortable, not as many lanes of traffic, a slower road. So it would be something more in line with what we see in lots of great urban locations. And then here's just a map with both of those on the table. We're going to show you a little bit of what some of the opportunities are for these various ideas. So reimagining the riverfront. What would happen if we were able to achieve a vision such as one of these options? Well, the first thing that we think is really exciting is really a really strong connected green network. We know from, and many of you know from visiting other cities around the country and around the world, that a lot of the great ones have this really awesome connected public space where you can move freely around through parks, along waterfronts, and get around the city in ways that you don't need to get into a car for. There's already a lot of great parks in Hartford and in East Hartford. Bushnell Park and Colt Park, obviously. All the great work that Riverfront Recapture has done, Riverside Park, as well as the parks along the East Hartford side. These could really be strengthened and connected in a much more synergistic way if we were able to reduce some of the highway infrastructure. Here's an image. Again, this is on the east side of 91. This is I-91 here, kind of, again, an elevated viaduct, the railroad's beneath. You can see Colt Dome in the distance, and the river would be off here to the side. So if we were able to lower I-91 and put it under, a deck and cover it, what could that look like? And if you just sort of fix your eyes on that dome, what you can imagine is pretty dramatic. And I think pretty aspirational. We can really sort of fold the parks and public spaces now across the highway. The highway would be below grade. You would really open up connectivity from these historic areas in Hartford to the waterfront that existed before the highway was built. Really create a much more active place for people to you know, congregate, to walk and move around the city. And we think this is doable. If you look at sort of a cut section of that area, you know, here's downtown over here on the left, here's the Bulkley Bridge over the Connecticut River. Here's I-91 as it's currently elevated up in the ground. You can see, you know, you can see it up on, you know, up on piers. And this little red mark here, that's the flood dike. So that's what's holding back the floodwater. So in the event of a 500-year storm, this would be, this dashed blue line would be sort of the level of water. That flood dike is very important. That can't go away. Obviously, we need that. But in the future, if we were to depress the highway, okay, if you can go back and forth and see that, we can lower the highway and then again create this capped section kind of from the top of the flood dike to downtown, where that could be overlaid with nice open space, a park, a much smaller road. Really present some really interesting opportunities for connecting downtown with the water. And just as we think about this connected green network, we can also think in terms of economic development. And what we mean by that is, you know, reinvestment in the cities, reinvestment in new buildings, in infill, you know, rehabilitating old buildings. But it's also more than that. It's really improving the public realm, the street systems, creating places that are more friendly for bikes, pedestrians, transit, creating a much more urban network. So we think the opportunities for development, you know, in East Hartford and Hartford's future is really great under this idea. Here's kind of a big picture overview. Again, what you can see here is these highways, really how they've disconnected downtown Hartford and East Hartford from the water. If you look at all of the massive kind of spaghetti of ramps and infrastructure here, it's consumed a lot of valuable land. You know, we think under these ideas, there's a real opportunity to shrink the footprint and really reclaim a lot of the space. And if we were to do that, what kind of development might we achieve in 50 years from now? Clearly, this is stuff that wouldn't happen overnight, but you know, if you look at some of these conceptual renderings, you could see that there's great opportunity to add density and mass, you know, to the downtown, plus create this really world-class trail system along the riverfront. Could be pretty exciting. And again, from a very high-level conceptual look, we took a look at parcels and property, how much land could be reclaimed. You know, we think in totality, maybe about 100 acres potentially could be reclaimed under such an idea. Obviously, this is a very rough idea. We'd have to look at this in much greater detail, but just to give you a sort of sense of scale. And then we think the last really exciting piece, you know, really good story to tell is how do we integrate public transit? And a lot of great things have been happening in recent years with Connecticut Fast Track development from New Britain up, you know, through West Hartford into Hartford, and the ongoing plans to expand it east of the river. So we think that, you know, this could potentially even assist in that and make it even better. But we also think that there's maybe opportunity for expanding the fast track system north and south as well, because now we're going to have, you know, additional dedicated roadways potentially on that cap that can carry transit. So great opportunities to better integrate transit into the downtown. And here's one more rendering. This is kind of at the back of the convention center, you know, looking over I-91. You know, currently this part of the city is almost, you know, kind of turned its back to the river, and for good reason. It's really, you know, looking over the highway, it's noisy. But if we were to rethink this highway, if we were to, you know, again, depress it and cap it, what could this area potentially look like? It could be a much more inviting environment. It could actually kind of flip that part of the city and again, re-engage and face the river. We can have dedicated trail systems, walking, biking infrastructure, dedicated transit routes, you know, much more friendly streets and easier connections right down to the waterfront. So just to summarize, we think that the key transformations are pretty dramatic and exciting for this kind of project. You know, getting back a world-class waterfront would be something that would be very ambitious and beneficial to both cities. Reconnecting a downtown that's been divided for a long time. In fact, it was sort of divided even before I-84 was there with the river and the railroad, but I-84 has certainly exacerbated that division. And you know, this is part of our 3D model, which is set up in the other room. And I encourage everybody to look at that because you can really see the changes between, you know, now and future proposed under that model. The new potential Bulkley Boulevard, if we were to take I-84 either south or north and away, we can really create a much different type of facility here over the Bulkley Bridge and through downtown. And of course, easing congestion. I think I said that was sort of the genesis of this whole project, but certainly it's a very important element of us looking at this idea even in the first place. And so really, there would be real tangible results for both East Hartford and Hartford. We think that, you know, there's a lot of exciting possibilities, and like Rich said, we don't have any answers tonight. We have a lot of big visions and big thoughts, but we'd love to hear more from you, and hopefully you'll stick around for our workshop, and we can talk more about some of these ideas. So, with that, let's. I think we're done, Rich.
Yeah, that's good. So I think that's the end of the presentation. 6:15. You can go to either spaces. Stay here for the interchange study. Go over to the other room if you're interested in some discussion on the rail station. But before we do that, any questions while we're here? Maybe 5 minutes. Any?
Which station should I go to if I'm more interested, instead of all this new development, just do, you know, like they mentioned over there. We can't leave it the way it is. So is there an intermediate that's being considered?
Intermediate with regards to improving the capacity of the.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
instead of me doing the whole thing
Yeah.
all over.
Okay. I would stay here for that because
Okay.
that's one of the scenarios is just staying right on existing alignment and exploring that.
It's like Cabot's Bridge.
Yeah.
They put a whole new bridge right there.
Right. Yep. That's one scenario. Widen Bulkley Bridge as an example. Any other questions, thoughts? The gentleman in the back with the checkered.
The project and the interchange project are two separate and distinct projects?
Yes. Yes. Two separate purposes and needs. The more near term is the viaduct project. The more long term visionary concepts are the interchange project concepts.
$4 to $5 billion rough order of magnitude is 45.
Just the viaduct, just our 2 mile section. Yep. Sure. This gentleman here? Yes, sir.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
With the construction and the environmental aspects of the project, what role does the Army Corps of Engineers play?
With regards to the interchange study,
Yes.
Christine, questions with regards to roles of Army, the role of Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, as you can see, those maps that have the state and the federal wetlands, there are going to be unavoidable wetland impacts, particularly if you're crossing the Connecticut River. So we're going to have to secure individual permit from the Corps of Engineers. So it's a lot of work. You submit the permit application, you do whatever you can to avoid wetland impacts, to minimize and then to mitigate for those. And you'll have to develop a mitigation plan to recreate, usually at a ratio of 2 acres created to 1 acre impacted of new wetlands. So I think that would be part of the whole possibility and opportunity along the waterfront to recreate the wetland mitigation in the area and have it treat stormwater management and all that good stuff. So the Corps will be very involved. Fish and Wildlife and EPA will also have federal oversight. So it's a heavy lift from a permitting environmental process. It's quite extensive.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir, in the green.
How about
The gentleman behind you, that's okay.
What's the factor on maintaining the highway as it is for 1 year? Doing nothing but repair.
For the viaduct section, well, I can't give you a per year value, but I will tell you this, that we anticipate if we don't undertake the viaduct project, if we do nothing, repair and maintain what we have, bridge replacements as needed, by the year 2040, we anticipate spending $2 to $3 billion just to maintain the current configuration as is. So it's not a small investment. It's a very large investment. So I don't know if that answers your question, but you can prorate that over the course of 25 years. It's quite a lot of money. Yeah. So when we talk about 4 to 5 billion or 4.5 to 5.5 billion, it's really comparing 4.5 to 5.5 to 2 to 3. That's the delta that we're comparing, not zero, because we're going to have to invest one way or another.
How about the levee system? Is there anything in consideration for them?
Yeah.
Being
So
upgraded or anything? Or?
yeah. So there's a little bit of a concern right now in Hartford, right near the Founders Bridge and the Bulkley Bridge, with the stability or the undermining under the flood dike. So this kind of project would probably be an opportunity to fix that, to correct that. So we'll have to see what happens as a result of this study to see if we have good momentum to move forward with some one of these concepts. But it would be an opportunity if we're touching 91 in that area, we would take the opportunity to fix the dike, the flood dike in that area. Anything else before we break up? Great. Okay, thanks very much. It's probably less than an hour, so 45 minutes. Not tonight. No.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I do business as LightSource Productions. I provide professional services in the area of strategic video communications. First, what we do is we help you craft your message using what I call the rule of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. We do event documentation, content acquisition, full-scale productions, editing, and of course distribution through our social media television network. And with social media, video is more important now than it has ever been. Whether you're talking big business, small business, nonprofit, church, or just an individual. Let's say you plan you're planning an event, a wedding, whatever the case may be. But let's say a big event, but no video. And you spent all this time, all these hours to put this event on, and maybe 100, 200 people attend the event. But more important than that is that thousands could attend by watching it on social media. But of course, you don't think about this until after the event is over. You can't afford not to capture it for social media. And despite what people think, I am affordable. Give me a call. Let's plan your next video project and share it with the world on my social media television network. I promise you that you will have the attention of one person, me.